I wonder if at midlife you're beginning to question what you're doing with your life and looking to start something new, but kind of struggling to get going. I'm going to be talking about the second curve and how every life, every enterprise in fact, needs to reinvent itself at some stage to continue to thrive. Welcome, I'm Lizzie Paish, founder of Permission to Be You, the programme for women at midlife who aren't prepared to stay stuck any longer. And today I want to talk about the second curve, which is a model designed by a man called Charles Handy, who describes himself as a future thinker. And although he works mainly with businesses, he has spoken also about how this model works for any kind of human enterprise, how any enterprise has this natural shape of evolution, and understanding that can help us to take action and to know when to get started on something new. So this is the model of Charles Handy's second curve, and as you can see, the first curve, that solid line, starts with a kind of dip, which he describes as, getting something going. So that might be survival of an organism, but the beginning of a business when things are tough and probably it's not making a profit. And then it starts to thrive. And, the same with our career, perhaps, that we began by not knowing very much, learning, and being given all the rough jobs, and then you become more experienced and you start to thrive in that role. Now, that can go on for years and for many decades in many cases. And of course, there might be curves within that where we change jobs and those kind of things. But what you can notice is where that dotted line begins. Obviously, that's the second curve. And what Charles Handy's premise is that every enterprise, having followed this line of maturity, then begins to decline. And it's at that point, or it's before that point, that we need to be starting this second curve of new enterprise, of reinventing whatever our project is to continue to thrive. And you'll notice that that second curve begins well before the first curve starts to decline. And the reason for that is that, once we're in decline, perhaps it's too late to begin the second curve. And Handy's teaches that we should be, whilst we're comfortable, whilst things are okay, is when we should be looking for starting to build what's the next project, because inevitably that second project, as you can see from the dotted line, follows the start pattern of the first, which is that there's a dip before it starts to build again. So if you think of this in terms of what's happening so often at midlife, is I have so many conversations with women who are feeling that sense that they want to get started on something new, but kind of stuck by the fact that things are okay as they are. I'm earning a good income. Things are going reasonably well. I'm okay. I could stay with this job, but I just have this sense that there's something new. And that, it seems to me, is like your wisdom calling to you and reminding you that it's time to be starting on that second curve. Not because you're desperate, not because you absolutely couldn't carry on a moment further. That's once you've got to that point of decline on the diagram, when it's very difficult then to scrabble around and start this new project. But now is the time, because you don't have to, but you could. You're in a position to start doing something new. And somehow just knowing that this model actually exists can be helpful in recognizing and responding to that call from inside of you to begin something new. And I listened to Charles Handy talk about this last summer, and I was very struck by some of the examples he gave that ranged from big business to personal relationships. So for example, in business terms, he spoke about Kodak as a great example of riding this wave of great success. In the 80s, I was buying nothing but Kodak film as I headed off around the world with my camera. But Kodak failed to see the digital revolution coming, and I don't know if they've actually gone totally out of business, but you don't hear about them now. But a converse example would be somebody like Apple, who Apple came in with the Apple Mac desktop publisher in whenever it was in the 80s, and it was this big thing, and it was going fine. It had it was successful, and Steve Jobs comes along and goes, we're getting into the music market, we're getting into the phone market, and the others at Apple are going, are you crazy? We've got this computer thing going, it's fine. And he saw that this curve of computers was one thing, and of course it's still growing, but there was something else. There was this second curve of digital music, and of course the rest is history. Apple were in on that at the very, very beginning. So that realization that just because something's fine, it doesn't mean it's going to go on forever, and there's this it's time to be building up this second project is so important. But Handy also spoke about personal relationships, and this guy, he's amazing. He's in his 80s and still, I hope I'm that vibrant and energetic when I'm in my 80s, because he was also talking about, all the stuff that he does, and this second curve in relation to relationships. So, every relationship goes through this kind of curve as well. Now, at midlife, we see a lot of that, don't we? We see a lot of people separating, getting divorced, getting new relationships. And, and that's one manifestation of this. But his premise was that every relationship needs to shift. If either it's going to go into this decline, or we need to reinvent it before that happens. And I think, I can see that really clearly in my own life, in that as a parent, that first part of life is all about child rearing and the focus on family and children and supporting them and all of that. And at midlife, when the kids are leaving home and things are changing in that respect, often people say to me, I look at my partner and it's as if I don't know them anymore. Well, this is the stage at which, coming up for that, we need to be looking at our relationship and saying, what do we need to change? What do we need to invest now in our relationship so that it's fit for purpose for this next part of life, when it's me and my partner and not this focus on the children? What do we need to look back to that we had at the beginning of this relationship and rediscover? So it's about that reinventing our relationship for the second half of life, establishing that second curve before we go into decline. And so, of course, if you're thinking about what to do with your career for this second part of life, this sense of something niggling at you, what next? I really feel there's something else for me. That's the time to be thinking about what that second curve might be for you. And often, of course, that thinking about what's next in terms of what I want to do with my life is not just about a practical shift from, do I want to change jobs? Do I want to start my own business? Do I want to stop working? Do I want to create something new? But it's about looking internally as well and discovering, what is it that I want to rediscover in myself? What is it that I need to see differently about the world and about me and about what I'm capable of, that is going to support me as I move into this second curve? What are those limiting beliefs, those restrictions that I see that I want to remove, so that I can step into a future of greater possibility and of understanding what's really out there for me? And a lot of women I speak to describe that as finding out who I really am again, because it's very easy in that first half of life when we're making our way in the world, either bringing up children or establishing a career, to lose touch with what we really want for ourselves. And that is the absolute crucial journey that we need to go on in this second half of life. And that's the work that I do with my clients in Permission to Be You, to help them to find out again who they really are, what they're really capable of, and what they really want. If you'd like to find out more about the work that I do with clients and the Permission to Be You programme, then take a look at the links below the video, and I look forward to getting to know you better very soon. If something struck a chord with you in this video, then please like and share so that others can get to see it too, and subscribe so that you can see other videos like this that I post every Saturday.